He should have died with the others. Kael'thor knelt in the obsidian courtyard of the Grand Temple, hands pressed against cold stone that hummed with dying power. Around him, reality was tearing itself open. The sky above the Eldari homeworld had turned the color of infected wounds, purples and golds that writhed like living tissue. The air tasted wrong. Copper and sweetness mixed together, making his stomach clench. Billions were dying, not screaming, not fighting, simply ceasing to exist as their souls were ripped from their bodies and devoured by the thing clawing its way into reality. The psychic scream echoed through dimensions that had no names, a sound that was pleasure and agony fused into something that made sanity itself flex and break. Yet Kael'thor remained, breathing, aware, alive. He was a spirit seer of the third rank, keeper of the infinity circuits, guide to the departed. For 3,000 years he had shepherded souls into the crystal lattices that held the consciousness of dead Eldari, preserving them for eternity. Those circuits were shattering now. He could feel each one break like bones snapping in his own body. The souls within didn't just die. They were being consumed by something vast and hungry that had just learned what appetite meant. His name meant Keeper of the Eternal Flame in the oldest tongue. The irony burned hotter than the temple fires that now guttered and died around him. Spirit Seer! The voice came from behind, cracked and ancient. Look up! The gods come! Kael'thor turned. Velianor stood there, the high Farseer of the temple, her face carved with lines of impossible age. She had seen the birth and death of stars, had walked the skein of fate for 5 millennia. Now her eyes had gone completely white, bleeding tears that steamed when they hit the ground. What? Kael'thor's voice was hoarse. Speaking felt like dragging broken glass across his throat. The Pantheon rises, Velianor whispered. All of them, even those who swore never to manifest again. They come to face her. Kael'thor felt it then. A pressure building in the warp, a gathering of power so immense it made the birth scream seem like a whisper. The gods were moving. Not individually, not in their separate domains. Together, united. For the first time in 10 million years, the entire Eldari pantheon was manifesting as one. The temple floor cracked beneath his feet. Kael'thor stumbled, catching himself against a pillar carved with prayers in 17 dead languages. The stone was hot now, burning hot, vibrating with divine fury. Asurion the Phoenix King, Kani the bloody-handed god, Isha the mother, Kernus the hunter, Vol the smith, Morai Heg the crone, Liliath the maiden, even Segorach the laughing god, who had hidden in the webway's depths for eons. They were coming, all of them, because she had awakened. Slaanesh, the prince of pleasure, the dark prince, she who thirsts, the youngest god, the bride of ruin, the thing they had birthed from 10,000 years of excess and depravity and pleasure, taken to heights that broke the laws of sanity itself. Kael'thor's hands trembled as he gripped his soul staff. The weapon was ancient, forged from psychic crystal, mined from the heart of a dying star, bound with the essence of 100 departed heroes. It pulsed in his grip, every soul within screaming in terror and rage. They knew what was coming. They could see further than the living, and they were afraid. Spirit Seer, Velianor said again. She pointed toward the sky with a hand that shook. Bear witness. Kael'thor looked up, and his breath stopped. The warp had torn open above them. Not the eye of terror that should have formed, not the screaming wound in reality that would birth demons for 10,000 years. Something else. Something bigger. A battlefield. Impossibly vast, where titans of pure thought and emotion clashed in combat that mortal minds could barely perceive without breaking. The sky became a window into war beyond comprehension. Asurion manifested first. The Phoenix King rose like a sun being born, wreathed in flames that burned colors Kael'thor had never seen. His form shifted constantly between a warrior king in armor of pure starlight and a phoenix made of cosmic fire, wings spreading across half the visible sky. When he spoke, Every living Eldari across the entire empire heard his voice inside their minds simultaneously. Children of the ancient stars, witness this hour. Today we do not fall. Today we stand. The god's voice was authority made manifest. It carried the weight of millions of years of rule, of divine right, of cosmic law. When Asuryan commanded, reality itself bent to listen. The Phoenix King raised his right hand, and the warp folded around his will. From his palm erupted a spear of concentrated stellar fire, a weapon forged from the heart of creation itself. It launched toward the writhing, obscene form of Slaanesh with speed that transcended distance. The spear struck true. Slaanesh shrieked. The sound was not pain. It was surprise, delight, pleasure at being touched by such power. Where the weapon pierced her flesh, reality warped and twisted. Warp energy hemorrhaged from the wound in streams of impossible color. But she did not fall. She laughed. The sound made Kael'thor's teeth ache, made his bones feel like they were vibrating out of phase with reality. It was pleasure and pain intertwined so completely that they became indistinguishable, beautiful and horrifying, seductive and repulsive. "Father," Slaanesh purred, and the word was wrong. It tasted of things that should not be spoken aloud. "You give me such wonderful gifts." Where the spear had struck, the wound was not closing. It was changing, transforming. The flesh around it rippled and grew new textures, new sensations. Not wounded, excited, learning what pain felt like when delivered by divine power. Cain roared. The war god charged forward, his avatar manifesting as a giant of burning bronze and crystallized rage. 20 meters tall, 50, 100. Size became meaningless as Cain grew to match the scale of battle. His blade, the wailing doom, screamed as it cleaved through layers of warp energy toward Slaanesh's heart. Beside him came Kurnus, the hunter, his form flickering between elf and stag, and something that was both and neither. His great bow, carved from the bones of the first forest, was drawn back. 3 arrows of solid moonlight streaked toward the Dark Prince's chest. Both gods struck simultaneously. The blade bit deep. The arrows pierced through. For a heartbeat, Kael'thor felt hope surge through his chest like molten gold. Then Slaanesh smiled. "More," she whispered, and the word echoed across dimensions. "Give me more." The arrows began to dissolve, their essence flowing into Slaanesh's form. Not destroyed, absorbed, consumed. The sword wound closed, but not through healing, through transformation. Where Cain's blade had cut, Slaanesh's flesh had learned violence, had tasted warfare, had experienced the ecstasy of battle. She was growing stronger. Velianar's grip on Kael'thor's arm tightened until he felt bone creak beneath her ancient fingers. "No," the Farseer breathed. "No, this cannot be. The prophecies said—" "The prophecies were wrong," Kael'thor finished quietly, the words tasting like ash. The other gods joined the assault. Val the smith emerged from his eternal forge, his form massive and scarred, missing one hand where Cain had taken it in their ancient duel. In his remaining hand, he wielded weapons of impossible craftsmanship, swords that could cut through time, hammers that could shatter concepts. He hurled them at Slaanesh with the precision of millions of years of divine artifice. Every weapon struck home. Every weapon was absorbed. Moriheg the crone wove curses that could unravel fate itself, her aged hands dancing through patterns that made reality whimper. She spoke words in the true language, the tongue that existed before existence, words that should have unmade anything they touched. Slaanesh drank them like wine. Liliath, the maiden, sang. Her voice held the power of dreams and prophecy and hope, notes that could reshape the architecture of possibility itself. The song was beautiful beyond mortal comprehension, sad beyond mortal endurance, powerful beyond mortal measurement. It made Slaanesh weep tears of joy. Isha wept too. The mother goddess cried tears that held the power of life and death, each droplet containing the potential for creation or destruction. They fell like rain towards Slaanesh, each one a prayer, each one a weapon, each one a desperate attempt to stop the thing that had been born from her children's sins. The Dark Prince caught the tears on her tongue and savored them. She's feeding on them, Kael'thor realized, his voice barely a whisper. Every aspect of our gods, every domain they represent. War, art, life, death, prophecy. She's consuming it all, learning from it. She's not just a chaos god. She's everything we ever were, everything we could have been, twisted into perfection. The battle raged. Asuryan's flames burned hotter than the birth of stars. Cain's rage could have shattered continents. Kernus's arrows multiplied until they filled the sky like falling stars, each one seeking Slaanesh's heart. Val forged new weapons with every heartbeat, each more devastating than the last. Marai Heg wove curses that should have destroyed lesser gods utterly. Lilliath's song rose to heights that made the warp itself resonate. It was not enough. Slaanesh was more than a god. She was apotheosis. The ultimate expression of everything the Eldari had ever been, freed from restraint, from morality, from sanity, from limitation. Every blow that should have destroyed her instead taught her something new. Every curse made her more beautiful. Every prayer against her became a new sensation to explore and master. The gods fought for what felt like seconds and eternities simultaneously. Time meant nothing here. Cause and effect were suggestions. Reality was negotiable. Kael'thor watched through the temple's psychic resonators, unable to look away even as his mind threatened to break from the sheer scale of divine warfare. He saw Cain land a blow that should have cleaved Slaanesh in half. Saw the Dark Prince reform instantly, laughing, the wound becoming a new mouth that spoke in tongues of pleasure pain. He saw Asuryan manifest the full fury of his phoenix form, becoming a bird of prey the size of solar systems, talons extended to tear Slaanesh apart. Saw those talons pierce through, saw Slaanesh embrace the Phoenix King, pulling him close, whispering something that made even Asuryan recoil. He saw Aisha wrap Slaanesh in vines of pure life force that should have strangled the Dark Prince into non-existence. Saw Slaanesh bite through those vines, consuming them, growing more vital with each swallow. The gods were losing. Not dying. Not yet. But losing ground. Losing power. Losing the fundamental struggle for supremacy. Then Asuryan did the unthinkable. The Phoenix King pulled back from the assault. His flames dimmed. His form contracted. When he spoke again, his voice carried no rage, only calculation. Cold, terrible calculation. Enough. The single word rippled through the warp with absolute authority. The other gods hesitated, disbelief radiating from them like heat. Caini turned toward his brother, blood dripping from a dozen wounds. "What?" "I said enough," Asuryan repeated. "This battle cannot be won through violence." "Then we die fighting," Caini roared. "We do not surrender." "I do not speak of surrender." Asuryan's gaze fixed on Slaanesh, who watched with predatory interest. "I speak of covenant." The word fell like a stone into still water, ripples of shocked disbelief spreading from it. Kael'thor felt his heart stop. The Phoenix King, the ruler of the Pantheon, the god of gods. He was going to bargain with chaos itself. "Dark One," Asuryan addressed Slaanesh directly, his voice formal, ceremonial. "Daughter born of our shame and excess. We cannot destroy you. This has been proven. You cannot destroy us, for we are sustained by aspects of existence that transcend your domain. We are matched." Slaanesh cocked her head, genuinely curious. Her form shifted, becoming almost childlike in its innocence, though her eyes remained ancient and knowing. "Matched? Oh, Father, you flatter me. Continue. This is delicious." "The Eldari are our children as much as yours," Asuryan continued, each word clearly costing him something precious. "They were ours before you were born. They gave you life through their actions, yes, but they were created by our will, shaped by our gifts, guided by our wisdom." "Were they?" Slaanesh smiled. "I think they outgrew you, Father. I think they desired more than you could give." "Perhaps." The admission seemed to pain Asuryan physically. "But they are divided now. Some seek restraint, others seek freedom. Some worship the old ways. Others embrace the new. This division will tear them apart more surely than any external enemy. And, Slaanesh prompted, clearly enjoying this, I propose a covenant, a division of claim. You may have those who have already fallen fully to excess, those who worship you willingly, those whose souls are so steeped in your nature that separation would destroy them anyway. We will guide those who seek the path, the discipline, the restraint, a balance between us. The other gods erupted in protest. Never! Cain's roar shook the warp. We do not bargain with corruption. Think, brother, Asurian said calmly. Without covenant, she consumes all. With it, we save some. Is some not better than none? Isha's voice was soft, broken. To abandon our children to her. Not abandonment, Asurian corrected. Choice. Let them choose. Those who seek us will find protection. Those who seek her will find what they desire. And both sides will know the cost of their choice. Kael'thor felt tears streaming down his face. The Phoenix King wasn't just bargaining. He was admitting defeat. Admitting that the gods could no longer protect all their children. That the Eldari race was too broken, too corrupted, too far gone to save completely. Some would be saved. The rest would be sacrificed. Slaanesh considered the offer, her expression shifting through 1,000 emotions in heartbeats. Amusement, curiosity, hunger, calculation. Finally, she laughed again, but this time the sound held something different. Respect, affection, twisted and cruel but genuine. Very well, Father. I accept your covenant, but hear my terms. Speak them. First, every soul that dies without protection comes to me. No exceptions. You may shelter those who follow your paths, who bind themselves to your discipline. But any who die unbound, uncertain, lost, those are mine. Asurian's flames flickered but held. Accepted. Second, I claim the right to tempt, to whisper, to offer choice. You cannot shelter them from knowledge of what I offer. They must choose willingly to follow your restraint, knowing full well what they refuse. A longer pause. Then, accepted. Third, the webway, the paths between worlds. Those belong to us both. Neither may bar the other completely from them. Segurash, who had been silent until now, laughed bitterly from the shadows. The webway's mine, youngest. I built its deepest labyrinths, and I will walk them freely, Slaanesh countered. Or there is no covenant. Asurian nodded slowly. The laughing god may maintain his sanctuaries, but the paths themselves remain open. Agreed. Fourth, Slaanesh's smile widened. I want a trophy, a reminder of this moment, of the day the gods bent knee to their own creation. We bend knee to no one, Cain snarled. Call it what you wish. Slaanesh's hand shot out with impossible speed, grasping Isha by the throat. The mother goddess struggled, vines erupting from her skin, trying to bind the dark prince. They dissolved like smoke. This one, Slaanesh declared, pulling Isha close. She who represents compassion and mercy and motherhood, all the things I will never be. I want her, as a pet, as a toy, as a reminder that even love can be possessed. Cain erupted forward, the wailing doom raised high. Release her! But before the war god could strike, another presence manifested. Nurgle, the plague god, emerged from the depths of his garden, bloated and rotting and vast beyond measure. He moved with surprising speed for his corrupted bulk, interposing himself between Cain and Slaanesh. Trade, Nurgle rumbled, his voice thick with decay and phlegm. Give me the pretty one. I'll give you something better for your collection, youngest. What Nurgle offered, Kael'thor could not see. But it must have been significant because Slaanesh actually hesitated. Her grip on Isha loosened slightly. You would keep her? Slaanesh asked. In my garden, Nurgle confirmed, where I test my gifts. She heals from everything. Perfect for my work. Better than your games, youngest. You would break her in a day. I will keep her forever. Slaanesh considered this. Then, with a shrug of indifference, she released Isha into Nurgle's waiting embrace. Keep the weeping mother, the Dark Prince said. I have no need for mercy. It's boring. Isha's scream of despair echoed across every layer of the warp as Nurgle dragged her into his garden. Kael'thor heard it echo through the temple, felt it reverberate in his bones. He saw Asuryan watching, but not intervening. The Phoenix King had made his choice. The Covenant was more important than any single god. "Do we have accord?" Asuryan asked formally. "We do," Slaanesh agreed. "Let it be sealed." The 7 remaining gods in the Dark Prince spoke words in the true language simultaneously. The Covenant formed as a structure of power in the warp, binding them all, limiting them all, protecting and condemning in equal measure. The gods withdrew, not destroyed, not defeated in the traditional sense, but diminished, limited, bound by their own agreement to share the race that had created them all. The vision ended. Kael'thor collapsed, gasping, his soul staff clattering to the ground. Around him, the temple was silent except for distant screaming. The infinity circuit still shattered. Souls still fled into the warp, but now there was structure to it, direction. Some souls veered toward the gods, others toward Slaanesh. The division had begun. Velianor knelt beside him, aged beyond counting now. "What have we become?" she whispered. Kael'thor had no answer. How could he? Their gods had survived, but they had lost something infinitely more precious than their lives. They had lost their supremacy, their absolute claim, their divine right to rule completely. The Eldari were no longer solely the children of the gods. They were also the children of Slaanesh. The days that followed were worse than the birth scream. Kael'thor walked through the temple of Asuryan, watching his world restructure itself around the Covenant. The change was not subtle. It was surgical, precise, terrible. The Eldari Empire, which had spanned 1,000,000 worlds and dominated the galaxy for longer than most species had existed, was tearing itself apart along lines of choice. He saw it happen in the temple courtyard. 2 spirit seers stood facing each other, brothers who had trained together for 1,000 years. One wore robes of disciplined white, the path of the seer binding him to restraint. The other had stripped his robes away, skin marked with symbols that writhed and changed, pleasure cult signs burned into his flesh. "Come with me," the disciplined one pleaded. "The craft worlds are leaving. We can escape her influence there. We can follow the path." The marked one smiled. "Escape? Brother, I don't want escape. I want to feel everything. The gods were chains. She is freedom. She will consume you, eventually, and it will be glorious." They parted, one toward the waiting craft world that hovered at the edge of the system, one toward the depths of Komarak, the dark city in the webway where those who embraced excess gathered to feed on suffering. Kael'thor watched this scene repeat 1,000 times across the dying empire. Families divided, lovers separated, warriors who had fought side by side for centuries, choosing opposite paths. The Covenant forced choice, and choice revealed truth. Some wanted restraint, structure, the old ways. They fled to the craft worlds, embraced the path system that Asuryan's priests rapidly developed. Narrow disciplines that would keep their souls focused, protected, unable to wander into Slaanesh's embrace. The path of the warrior, the path of the seer, the path of the artisan. Each one a prison of purpose, but a prison that kept them safe. Others wanted freedom. They retreated to Komara, where Slaanesh's influence was muted by the webway's strange properties. There they would feed on the suffering of others to keep their own souls bright enough to avoid her hunger. A different kind of prison, one built on cruelty instead of discipline. The Exodites chose a third way, fleeing to the galaxy's rim, embracing primitive life close to nature and Cornus's lingering influence. They would live simply, die simply, and hope that simplicity kept them beneath Slaanesh's notice. And the Harlequins followed Segarak into the webway's deepest mazes, becoming players in an eternal performance, their souls protected by the laughing god's jokes and riddles. 4 paths, 4 survivals, each one incomplete, each one a compromise. Kael'thor stood in the temple's highest tower, watching the craft worlds depart. Massive vessels of psychic crystal, each one a self-contained world. He could see Ulthwé leaving, its black hull reflecting nothing. Bieltan followed, white and green, already planning vengeance. A light talk shimmered into the distance, choosing isolation. His own craft world, Ithilmar, would leave tomorrow. "Will you come?" He turned. Velianor stood in the doorway, wrapped in the white robes of the path. She had chosen. She would be a farseer of the craft worlds, guiding her people through discipline and prophecy. "I don't know," Kael'thor admitted. "You saw what I saw," Velianor said quietly. "The gods bargained. They gave up their absolute claim to save what they could. It was pragmatic, necessary perhaps, but it was defeat. Yes, and yet they survived. Assyrian still lives. Kane still rages. Kurnus still hunts in the deep warp. They are diminished, but present. That is more than I expected when she was born." Kael'thor gripped the tower railing, knuckles white. "Is it? Is survival enough when it costs so much? What choice did they have? They could have fought to the end. Could have spent themselves completely trying to destroy her. Could have died as gods should die, in glory, in defiance, in absolute refusal to compromise." Velianor was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of prophecy. "I have looked into the skein of what might have been, seen the threads where they fought to mutual annihilation. Do you know what I saw? Tell me." "Nothing. Absolute nothing. If the gods had fought until total destruction, they would have torn the warp itself apart in their fury. Reality would have collapsed. Not just the Eldari. Everything. Every soul. Every world. Every possibility. The gods chose survival not just for themselves, but for existence itself." Kael'thor felt something cold settle in his chest. "So we live in the lesser evil. We live in the only option that allowed us to live at all." Below them, another craft world launched. Its departure left a wound in the sky, warp energy bleeding through the gap. Kael'thor could see figures moving on its surface. Families, warriors, seers, all of them choosing the path, choosing restraint, choosing the prison that would keep them safe. "The Covenant changes everything," Velianor continued. "Slaanesh has agreed not to actively hunt those who follow the paths. She will wait, will tempt, will whisper, but will not force. The gods, in turn, will not actively oppose her claim on those who choose her. It is balance. Balance," Kael'thor repeated bitterly. "We were gods among mortals. Now we're cattle divided between shepherds." "Yes," Velianor met his gaze steadily. "But living cattle, that counts for something." She left him there, descending the tower to prepare for departure. Kael'thor remained, watching the sky tear itself apart as more craft worlds fled. He thought about the Covenant, about what it truly meant. The gods had not won, but they had ensured continuation. The Eldari would survive, divided and diminished, but alive. Some would follow the old ways, others would embrace the new, and both sides would endure, locked in eternal opposition. It was not victory, but it was not extinction either. Kael'thor descended the tower as night fell. The temple was emptying rapidly. Most spirit seers had already chosen. Most were going to the craft worlds. A few, twisted by curiosity and desire, had fled to Commorragh. Fewer still had chosen the Exodite worlds or the Harlequin's path. He found himself in the Chamber of Souls, where the infinity circuits had once hummed with billions of preserved consciousnesses. Most were destroyed now, shattered in the birth scream. But some remained, protected by ancient wards and desperate prayers. The surviving souls whispered to him. They had seen the Covenant form, had felt the division take hold. They understood what it meant better than the living. "Will you keep us safe?" one ancient soul asked, her voice like wind through crystal. "I will try," Kael'thor promised. "The path will protect you," another soul said. "Follow it. Never deviate. And when you die, your soul will join ours here, safe from her hunger." "Unless I fail," Kael'thor said quietly. "Unless I stray even once. Then she claims me, Covenant or not. Then do not stray." It sounded so simple, so clear. But Kael'thor had seen the Covenant form, had felt its terms settle into reality. He understood the trap within it. Slaanesh didn't need to hunt them. The Covenant ensured that. Any Eldari who died without perfect discipline, without absolute adherence to the path, without a soul stone to catch their essence, those went to her automatically. She could simply wait, could whisper doubts, could plant seeds of curiosity. Eventually, almost everyone would slip, would wonder, would stray just enough, and she would be there, waiting, patient as eternity. The gods had traded immediate annihilation for slow attrition. It was the correct choice strategically, but it felt like defeat nonetheless. Kael'thor spent the night among the infinity circuits, listening to the dead counsel the living. By dawn, he had made his choice. He would go to the craft worlds, would follow the path, would teach others to walk the narrow way between discipline and annihilation. Not because he believed it would work forever, but because it would work for now. And now was all any of them had. The last craft world departed 3 days later. Kael'thor stood on Ithilmar's observation deck, watching the Eldari homeworlds recede into the distance. The planets that had been paradise were now hellscapes, their populations gone, consumed in the birth scream or fled to various sanctuaries. The Eye of Terror had not formed. That was one mercy the Covenant had granted. With the gods surviving, and Slaanesh's power contained by negotiation rather than pure consumption, the warp breach was smaller. Still terrible, still deadly, but not the galaxy-spanning wound it might have been. Small mercies, Kael'thor thought bitterly. First time, a voice asked beside him. Kael'thor turned. A young warrior stood there, barely 300 years old, her armor pristine white, marked with the symbols of Cain. She had chosen the path of the warrior. First time watching our civilization die? Kael'thor asked. Yes, mine too. The warrior smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. My name is Celerath. I trained in the war shrines for 2 centuries. Thought I understood battle. Then she was born, and I learned that I understood nothing. None of us did. The priests say we should be grateful, that the gods saved us. What do you think? Celerath looked out at the dying worlds. I think we saved ourselves. The gods just negotiated the terms. Asurion bought us time. Kaini bought us the right to fight. Kurnus bought us the wild places to hide. But we have to do the actual surviving. Kael'thor felt something shift in his chest. She was right. The gods had created the framework, but the Eldari themselves would have to live within it. Generation after generation, walking the narrow paths between safety and damnation. The Covenant holds as long as we follow the paths, Kael'thor said, as long as we maintain discipline. And when we don't, Celerath asked, when someone slips, when curiosity wins, when desire becomes too strong, then she claims them, and we mourn, and we continue. For how long? Kael'thor had no answer. The Covenant didn't specify an end. It was eternal, binding the gods and Slaanesh in perpetual division of their shared children. The Eldari would walk this knife edge forever, each generation losing some to her hunger, each generation trying desperately to teach the next how to survive. Until we find another way, he finally said, or until we all fall. Celerath nodded slowly. The Farseers speak of a new god, Inead, the god of the dead. They say he grows in the infinity circuits, fed by every Eldari soul that dies properly, that enters the crystal instead of being consumed. They say when enough souls gather, when enough die in discipline, Inead will be born, and he will fight Slaanesh for us. How long will that take? Thousands of years? Tens of thousands? Maybe more. Kael'thor felt ancient already. The thought of millennia more of this careful, desperate survival made his soul ache. But what choice was there? Then we survive until then, he said. The craft world jumped into the webway, leaving real space behind. In the warp, Kael'thor could feel the gods watching. Asurion's flames burned steady, reduced but unextinguished. Kaini's rage simmered, waiting for worthy battle. Kurnus hunted in the deep places. Segorach laughed in the shadows. And Slaanesh waited, patient, hungry, bound by covenant not to hunt actively, but free to tempt, to whisper, to offer everything the path denied. The game had begun. Gods against God. Discipline against desire. survival against slow consumption. The Eldari had not fallen completely, but they had not won either. They existed in the terrible space between, walking paths that grew narrower with each generation. Kael'thor took up his position as spirit seer of Craftworld Ithilmar. He would teach the young, would shepherd souls into the infinity circuits, would help build Inead, soul by carefully preserved soul, death by disciplined death. It would take forever. It would cost everything, and it might not even work. But it was the only option the gods had left them. He stood in the Chamber of Souls, surrounded by the crystal lattices that held the dead. They hummed with purpose now, each soul a tiny piece of salvation, gathering slowly toward critical mass. "We will endure," Kael'thor told himself. "The gods survived. We will survive. And someday, perhaps, we will be free." The souls whispered agreement, but he heard doubt in their voices. They knew the truth as well as he did. They were not free. They were divided, claimed by multiple powers, trapped between competing shepherds, walking paths that offered only continued existence, never true victory. The gods had survived the birth of Slaanesh. In doing so, they had ensured the Eldari would survive too, but survival was not triumph. It was merely the continuation of struggle, and that struggle would last forever. Outside, in the warp, he felt Slaanesh's attention brush against the Craftworld's wards, not attacking, just watching, waiting, knowing that eventually, inevitably, some would stray, some would wander, some would choose her. The Covenant guaranteed it, protected both sides equally, ensured eternal stalemate. The gods had won their survival, but the Eldari would pay the price for it, one soul at a time, for all eternity. Kael'thor closed his eyes and began to pray, not for victory, not for freedom, just for the strength to walk the path one more day, to teach one more student, to save one more soul. It was all any of them could do. The gods had survived. That was true. But as Kael'thor stood in the darkness of the Chamber of Souls, listening to the dead whisper warnings to the living, he wondered if survival was really enough. The answer, cold and terrible, settled in his heart. It had to be, because it was all they had left.